So is the future already contained in the present? What do I mean by the present? Well, I mean the present reality, our present reality. And in particular, I mean my personal present reality. Does my personal present reality already contain literally portion of the future? And in which sense? So this is what I'm going to try to explain in this video. Of course, reality is a huge thing. When we talk about reality, we have, of course, to explain what we mean by it. And I will explain to you what I mean by it. What I mean by when I say that something is part of my present reality. But I will limit my reflection, which by the way is not really mine, it comes from reflections that were offered years ago by the Belgian physicist Diederik Aerts, with whom I have the pleasure to collaborate. So much of what I'm going to say today comes from his work. So reality, we have to define what we mean by reality. And here I will focus on some very specific aspects of reality. Let's say I will focus on that part of reality that I can represent in space, the spatial reality. Well, many believe that reality all happen in space. But of course, we know that there are hidden aspects of reality which you cannot fit into space. And these we might call them the dimension of potentiality, which is contained in reality and which is essentially non-spatial and even non-temporal. Quantum mechanics has brought us in close contact with that potential element of our reality, something which you cannot fully represent in space and time. And of course, the ancients also had a lot of intuition about it. Probably they were considering other aspects of potentiality of reality. But I will not talk about these hidden aspects, these potential elements of reality. I will only talk here about the actual elements of reality. And so when I say elements, so essentially what can be fully characterized here in our spatial theater. Okay, so this is for reality, and I will tell you exactly how I should define my personal present reality. And when I will do so, when I will define exactly what my present personal reality is, then I will prove to you somehow that then the future is already contained in it to some extent. So of course we will also talk about present and future, therefore by time we'll talk about time. And again, time is a huge notion, and I will limit my discussion to some aspect of this huge notion of time, which by the way we cultivate a lot of misconception when we talk about time. Think just about the fact that most people think about time as something that passes. Time passes, we say. But in fact, it is not true. I mean, time is really the only aspect of reality which does not pass. And it is precisely because of that all the rest of reality can pass, can change. Time is a little bit like change. Change also does not change. If change exists, change will not change. Change is what allows everything else to change. And same as time, which usually is conceived as a way to quantify change. But in any case, time does not change. Time cannot have a speed, because to calculate a speed you need a time reference, and of course you cannot calculate the variation of time with respect to itself. So you really see that time does not pass. So this is just to point to a common misconception. So when we talk about time, we usually do not understand this notion very well. And also because we have an experience of time which is limited because we are beings who evolved on the surface of this planet, and we interacted with other entities having a relative speed with respect to us, which is low. And so we also never really experience the so-called relativistic effects. And these relativistic effects are objective. We know now that they are real. And they, of course, affect the way reality is. They affect our understanding of time. But, okay, so time does not pass. So everything else passes. Time is kind of the engine of reality. And we tend to mix temporal, we tend to attach to time the properties of the temporal phenomena, and so we make all sort of confusion. But okay, we will not deal with all these deep philosophical issues here. We will be much more pragmatic, and we simply will use our, let's say, common understanding of time plus what we know about relativity, and in particular that effect of relativity which is known as time dilation effect, and how this effect affects, influences our construction, our understanding of what our present reality is. All right, so let me maybe start by telling you how we should understand the notion of reality, my personal present reality. So my name is Massimiliano, and I have a phone here. Phone indicates December 2021. Well, the exact time is not so important. Let's say I define time in a very rough way because otherwise it's too complicated. But I have a certain, I am living at a certain moment of time, which is indicated by the calendar of my smartphone. And I would like now to know if the different things I can interact with are real. I mean, how do I define reality in the first place? What is real for me, of course? So, for instance, this smartphone, is it real for me? How can I say that this smartphone is an existing element of my personal present reality? Well, what kind of criterion do I use to assess that? Well, it's very simple. Of course, I can just observe that I'm interacting with it. So interacting with it means I'm having an experience now with my smartphone. And since I'm having an experience now with my smartphone, I can say that my smartphone, in virtue of that, exists. So this is a very basic, simple definition. So something is real if something is real now, if something is available now to be part of my experience, so that I can create whatever with it. So, okay, so this is, I think, non-controversial. But now let me ask you ask myself if my car, which is parked far away from here, let's say a few hundred meters from here, is also real. Now we all have a very deep intuition that my car, I kind of know it. I know that my car is real now as well. Not only my phone here, but also my car. But of course, I cannot use again the same criterion I was using for my phone. And the reason for that is that I'm not having an experience now with my car. So how can I say that my car is nevertheless part of my personal present reality? How can I say that my car exists now? So what kind of criterion should I use to be able to say that? Of course, we usually don't think in terms of a reality criterion, but because a lot of things just happen at the subconscious level. But if we put some thoughts into this issue, we can come with a criterion, an understanding of why, what is the real reason why I can say I'm confident that my car exists now, even though I'm not having an interaction, an experience with my car now. Because you see, if I walk towards my car, I am certain that I will meet my car, I will be able in my future to have an experience with it, but that's in the future. How can I say it exists now? Now, the interesting thing is that to be able to do so, well, first of all, I have to reflect about what I could have done in my past. And in fact, here the notion of choice intervene. You have to understand that in our reality we make choices, and these choices dictate which experiences we have and which experiences we have not. Now, in this moment, I'm in front of this camera, recording this video, so I am having this experience with my phone and these cameras, but I could have chosen differently in my past. Say, 10 minutes ago, I could have decided to walk towards my car instead of coming in this room. And now, exactly now, I would be having an experience with my car instead of my phone. Or of the place in which I am now. So you see, now, of this fact, I am certain, in the sense that I am 100% certain, which means probability equal to 1, but if in my past, say 10 minutes ago, I would have chosen differently to go towards my car, with certainty now I would be having an experience with it. And that because of this prediction, the fact that I am certain of that, I know that my car is an element of my reality, in the sense that it is an element which is available to be part of an experience of mine, even though I am not presently having an experience with it. And the reason for that is that we can only have one experience at a time. We make choices. Every choice dictates which experience we are having in a given moment. So my present personal reality is a collection of all those entities which could have been part of my experience now, but are not part of my experience now because I'm just having one experience. I cannot have all of them simultaneously. So you see, it's really a construction about the possible, all elements that are possible part of my experience, even though I will probably never experience them. So this is a counterfactual construction of reality. So reality is big enough. It's not just what I am experimenting, because if reality would just be what I'm experimenting, in a sequential way, it would be very narrow, like a one-dimensional line. But in fact, reality, much more things exist in my reality. And I know that because they are available to my experience, even though I have chosen not to have an experience with them. So this is the idea. Now you can reflect a little bit about that, but this is really the way we construct our personal present reality. And this is really the criterion I can use to say that my car exists. In fact, this reality criterion is mutuated by a criterion which was proposed by Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen in the 30s of last century in a paper which became famous as the EPR paradox, where Einstein and collaborator were discussing in this paper about entanglement and completeness of quantum mechanics. But to do so, they had to start with a general enough reality criterion. And this general enough reality criterion introduced the notion of predictability. This criterion was further refined by Constantin Piron of Geneva University, and then Diederik Aerts when he did his PhD thesis under the direction of Piron, by the way. So the idea is that something is a property, an actual property of our reality is really a state of prediction, what I can predict with certainty. So when I define a property, I say a property is actual if I can predict with certainty that the outcome of the testing that property will be positive, will be successful. But I don't need, of course, to perform the test. So it's this kind of criterion which I have just applied to define what my personal present reality is. The collection of all those elements that are available to be part of my experience, even though they are not presently part of my experience, because I'm having only one experience at a time. Very good. So this is for the part of the definition of what I call my present, my personal present reality. And again, let me emphasize that I am here only mentioning the reality I define inside the spatial theater. I am not talking about hidden elements, about potential elements. This would, complicate and enlarge our discussion, which I will not do it here. Okay. Now, what is interesting is to push a little bit further the understanding of this construction, of this definition of my personal present reality. And now I want to use also the ingredient of relativity and see that the surprising result that my future is already part, literally, of my personal present reality is a correct statement. Because you see here, for instance, where am I now? Here I am in a city which is called Lugano in Switzerland, and as my phone tells me, we are December 2021. So I can say that Lugano in December 2021, I'm having an experience with it, of course not with the whole Lugano, but okay, I'm in Lugano, in a location in Lugano, in Barbengo. And so I'm having an experience with the city of Lugano, so I can say that Lugano now exists. That's clear. Now, I could also ask, does New York, for instance, exist now? Now, if you remember my previous reasoning, I can say that New York also exists now. Why? Because, say, a few days ago, I could have taken an airplane, and now, instead of being here, I would be in New York, having an experience with New York. So, New York is also existing now. Good. Now, let me ask a more tricky question. Is Lugano in December 2022, so 1 year ahead with respect to my present moment now? Is Lugano December 22 already existing, already part of my present personal reality, where present means December 2021? So is Lugano 1 year ahead in time already part of my personal present reality? So if you ask this question, like that, people will say, of course not. I mean, how could it be? The future is precisely the future. What is in the future did not happen yet. So the future is separated from the present, and the present is separated from the past. And past, present, future, we precisely use this notion to separate things. Is that true? Now, if I want to answer this question, I need to use this reality criterion I've just, formulated previously, and see if I can apply it to deduce the fact that Lugano in 1 year is already part of my present reality. So, in this moment, for sure, I'm not experimenting Lugano in 2022, December 2022. In this present moment, I'm experimenting Lugano December 2021. But the question I have to ask is the following. Could I have chosen differently my past in such a way that now, instead of having an experience with Lugano December 2021, I would be having an experience with Lugano December 2022. And you see, the answer is yes, because imagine the following. Imagine that I have some alien guys which are friends of mine. They are from a more advanced civilization. And imagine that 2 weeks ago, I would be meeting with this friend from other planets, and they would borrow me their spaceship. They would say, hey, take our spaceship. We want to have a nice, travel around. And since this is a very advanced spaceship, it can travel at a speed which is rather close to the speed of light. And I could have chosen 2 weeks ago to take that spaceship, and travel, in the direction of whatever star, doing some travel, and then after some moment coming back to planet Earth. And I could calculate the speed and the amount of time of my travel, so that when I am back, and I'm back to Lugano, so let's say I've started my travel two weeks ago or 2 days ago, it doesn't matter. And I could have chosen to do my travel in such a way, my back and forth travel, forth and back travel, in such a way that when I am back now, I decided in my past to do it, so that my travel is such that I am back now. But you see, because of the time dilation relativistic effect, I would be back now, but then if I would go in Lugano, meet people and ask people, hey, hi, hello, I'm Massimiliano, please, what is today's date? They, of course, would look at me in a strange way. Probably they will think I'm crazy. If they think I'm dangerous, probably they will answer more easily. So they will probably show, the date on their smartphone, and the date would be December 2022. Which means that if in my past I would take a spaceship to do a trip and come back at a very high speed, I can calibrate my travel so that I will be back now, here in this present moment, but instead of having an experience with Lugano December 2021, I would be having an experience with Lugano December 2022, because all clocks, all people will be older and will be part of the future Lugano. So Lugano in the future, in 1 year ahead, is already part of my personal present reality. And this is quite astonishing, because we are not used to have this kind of understanding, because of course we are not used to integrate relativistic effect in our reality construction, because of course these effects have always been negligible for us humans on the surface of this pale blue dot. So yes, so the future, and in fact, of course, it's not just Lugano, which is in 1 year, but also Lugano in 6 years, in 5 minutes, in whatever. Because you see, time dilation is an effect which has happened all the time. Every time an entity moves and comes back, it desynchronizes with respect to another entity. We don't realize it, but because of our relative motions, when we let's say we are in a certain place in a certain moment, then one of the two entities or the two person change, travels and come back, then these entities are not again meeting at the same time. One of the entities will be in the future of the other entity. So this is due to this time dilation effect, which is of course well studied, and it's an objective effect. So it is experimentally tested all the time. So you see, this tells us something quite interesting about how our space and time reality is. By the way, let's just talk a little bit about this time dilation effect. So when we move relative one to another, the way our clocks measure time changes, and so we desynchronize in time. I remember, by the way, I mentioned already Constantin Piron. When I was in Geneva many, many years ago, I was a young student. I started a PhD with him. Then I did not finish the PhD with him, and I did a PhD with Philippe Martin, another professor. There is, by the way, a video where I tell a little bit of my story with Constantin Piron. There's a video in French, so you need to understand French to follow it. I will put the video in the description. But when I was with Constantin, he asked me to work on electrodynamics and to construct a theory of electrodynamics in a box, and he wanted me to use his understanding of relativity at the time. And why am I telling you this? Is because at the time Piron was deeply reflecting about whether we are truly in a space-time continuum or not. And he convinced himself, and I think he was wrong, by the way, but he convinced himself that we were not in a space-time continuum, but we were really inhabiting a three-dimensional Euclidean time, and that the time axis was totally independent of the spatial theater. And the reason why that's how I remember it, but he came to that conclusion is the following. He said, but you see, because if all the entities which move one with respect to the other constantly desynchronize one with respect to the other, how is it possible that they can nevertheless meet? Because you see, if I have to meet a person, I give a person, an appointment and say, we have to meet at a given place at a given time. So we really have to take care to have the same place and the same time to be able to meet. If we go to the same place but at different times, we will not meet. If we go at the same time in different places, we will not meet. So we really have to be there in a same location, both spatially and temporally. Now, Piron, I'm not sure I remember properly his line of thought, but something of the sort. He was reflecting about the fact that if it is true, this time dilation effects are true, so we truly desynchronize in time. And he was thinking that if we truly inhabit a space-time continuum where we can move both in space and time, and if we desynchronize in time because of time dilation effects, then how is it possible that we can still meet? Because we know when we start desynchronizing, that's once for all. And so how can I still meet all the different entities in space? How is it possible, since our time will not be anymore the same? So if we are really in a space-time theater, it would mean that we cannot meet anymore. But since we can meet, this means that we are not, that was the reasoning of Piron, this means that we are not in a space-time continuum. And so his idea was that we are truly inhabiting a three-dimensional space, time was a separate dimension, and the relativistic covariance effect, the Lorentz transformation and so on, these were only dynamical symmetry valid for the dynamical laws, but were not telling us that we are truly living in a space-time continuum. Now, of course, I think this is wrong, but what we have to accept following relativity is that, of course, there is not, now, what I just told you, the reasoning I just tried to convey to you, which comes from the work of Diederik Aerts, tells us that if the future is also part of my present, so if my present is formed by entity having different time coordinate, if you will, This means that I am truly inhabiting a four-dimensional representation, a time-space continuum. But the reason why I can still meet all the other entities, and even if we kind of desynchronize in time, is because, in fact, every entity constructs its own time and space theater. So I have my own time axis, which is the axis I use to put all my experience in order. And then I create a spatial axis, which I use to bring in the same description, coherent description, also my relation with respect to other entities, but it is my construction, so it's my personal time and space. And every entity can be associated with a different time and space. But in fact, all entities truly inhabit a reality which is beyond the space and time reality. We just construct a time and space, a personal one, which is a way, to put order in some classes of our experiences. Of course, this would become a very more involved discussion to say, again, okay, so if we are not, so I'm back a little bit to what I previously said, that our reality is much bigger than what is in our time and space representation. Each entity has its own time and space. Each entity can represent some of the relations with the others inside this time and space representation, but this time and space representation is not where every physical entity actually inhabits. Every physical entity actually inhabits a non-spatial and non-temporal reality, which is much huger, and this, again, points to this dimension of potentiality. But of course, this would be a different topic to discuss. So what I try here really to explain, and I hope I succeeded somehow to convey something interesting, our reality, our spatio-temporal reality is truly four-dimensional, but it is four-dimensional not just because you have a Minkowskian geometric representation. No. We are really, if I really apply a reality criterion, general enough, I must conclude that entities in the future are already part of my present reality. And this is because we construct reality in a counterfactual way, and what is real is what is available to be experienced by me in the present, and what is available to be experienced in the present is what I could have experienced if I would have acted differently in my past. And because of a time dilation relativistic effect, the consequence of that is that future entities are already part of what is available to my present experience. This looks strange to our minds, which are not used to represent reality in four dimensions, but because of our biological evolution of the brain we use are wired in a way that these relativistic effects are not included, and this is the reason why all this looks a little bit strange. I hope it nevertheless was interesting enough for you. Thank you for listening.